We will now invite responses to 4 questions, which will be asked by UUFRC member Carol Cross, and I will be rotating the names of candidates after each question.
So, hello and thank you for being here. Our organizations all believe that our community belongs to all who live in it, regardless of race, gender, economic status, sexual orientation, ability, or immigration status. We believe safe, dignified, and genuinely affordable housing is a basic human right and the cornerstone of a strong community. What do you believe are the most effective policies for assuring the most vulnerable in our community are able to live safely and affordably?
First, Chris, please.
Thank you. I'm committed to doing everything we can to increase housing stability for all of our vulnerable communities. We must ensure that our essential workers and our working families are able to live and raise their families in the community they serve. We must protect jobs and make sure that they have the income that they need to stay in their homes and in our community. We need to prioritize essential services to our unsheltered community members and recognize that homelessness in the city is a crisis. I've worked with the homeless for many years, and I can tell you it is a crisis and we need to address that urgently. As with many issues, COVID-19 has also raised awareness about how vulnerable people are without housing. The recent wildfires have only exacerbated the problem with the air quality. And we must concentrate our efforts and encourage our most vulnerable people to feel connected to our community. And we need to rethink how we address our communities in crisis and continue to invest in them and support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I forgot to mention the candidates are each getting 1 minute to answer these. Just to remind you, they had the questions beforehand. Next, Isabella.
Thank you. So I think the first thing we have to remember is how we got here. So it used to be that cities were able to add housing to meet the needs of their population. And then in the middle of the last century, this thing called exclusionary zoning was invented. And the primary purpose of this was to separate uses and to separate people and to keep people out. So if we want to give power to tenants, the most effective thing we can do is have an ample supply and a wide variety of housing. And to do that, we need to undo these exclusionary, racist, classist policies from the middle of the last century. The second thing we need to do is enact strong renter protections and provide ample renter support and support for our unhoused residents. That includes supportive services, generous parking programs for individuals in mobile homes and similar, or not mobile homes, RVs and things like that. But the single most powerful thing we can do is to liberate zoning and allow our city to produce enough housing so that everyone who needs a place to live can have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Next, Janet.
Thank you for that question. So I'm going to take it in a little different direction. First, I want to say that Redwood City is doing their first safe parking program, which in itself is a huge step. And I look forward to how that evolves and how we can actually not only provide safe housing for our RV dwellers, but to do wraparound services. But there's another component that we haven't talked about, and it's about those that we currently have in affordable housing and what that means to their lifestyle. Living in an affordable unit does not mean you need to live in a unit that has not been kept up. And I have seen a lot of buildings that currently are infested by rodents or vermin, that the stairwells are broke down, that the light fixtures don't work, the toilets don't work, and they're all afraid to call to get these fixed because they have a low-income unit and it's not run by an agency. So I really want to make sure that we get our codes strict and out there, our code enforcement out there, to make sure that they're not only being given the opportunity for affordable housing, that they actually have affordable housing they can live in.
Thank you, Janet. Jeff?
I'm sorry, Sasha. I had to switch views because the card doesn't show up on the speaker view. That's what we're struggling with as speakers. Similar to Janet's question, I think there's 2 answers. One is preserving the quality of our existing affordable housing stock. And while there is always the renter protection conversation, the equal question is how do we keep it quality? I think landlords need to do annual assessments, set aside reserve and maintenance budgets, and to demonstrate that they are maintaining through inspection quality living conditions. I'm the president of my HOA. I have to do a reserve study every year, and I have to show I have a budget to replace and maintain the properties. The second thing, as Bella shared with us, we have to create more housing. And what the city can do from a policy standpoint are 4 things. Streamline the approval process, not take years, but weeks and months to get projects approved. For our affordable housing projects, they need to go to the front of the line, just like LEED projects did when LEED was in vogue. They should be first in line for permitting and approval. Third, educate our building officials on prefabrication, modular, and new construction techniques. Our building officials already struggle with what they have now. And lastly, find an ombuds to shepherd housing projects through the city process. Thanks.
Jeff. Lisette?
Hi. So what we need to do is implement the strongest rent control legally possible. So rent control is needed to protect our most vulnerable from displacement and from gentrification that has happened by the city's overdevelopment of luxury apartments and offices. What the city considers affordable isn't to low-income people. So we should also invest in public housing and land trusts to ensure housing for all. Our priority should be that everyone has housing as a human right, and we don't have the quarter of the homeless population of San Mateo County living in Redwood City that we have today. So we need to ensure that for everyone as our priority, housing for all as a guarantee, and housing that isn't at a market rate value. So beyond just the affordable rate that we have now, which is adjusted to the median income, that isn't enough for most of our residents. So public housing that is free for all, regardless of ability to pay or income, or past experiences of not being able to afford fees.
Thank you, Lisette. Next, we'll hear from Mark.
Addressing the housing crisis in new ways is key to protecting vulnerable residents in our community. Our current BMR system is inefficient, creating significant congestion for relatively limited affordable housing relief. For example, although there are currently moderate income units available, all or the vast majority of low income or very low income units have wait lists, many of which have been closed for years due to being at full capacity. I aim to refine the system to better serve the community by allocating a higher percentage of units to low income and very low income residents. Redwood City also needs to incorporate methods that limit demand to allow for a more affordable market rate rent. This can be achieved by limiting office space development, converting vacant office space into housing, and protecting and developing additional housing that is naturally more affordable. Lastly, I prioritize assisting the homeless living in RVs, but also the homeless living on the street through supporting the shelters that serve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. If you guys switch to gallery view, you should be able to see the times for when you're speaking. If that still doesn't help, please let me know. Next, we'll hear from Michael.
Thank you so much, Stasha. This is absolutely the most important question that I think the City Council will be dealing with. As a renter who's decided to make Redwood City home, I'm impacted by the challenges of residential affordability on a daily basis. You know, I've witnessed many friends and neighborhoods endure economic displacement forced to navigate its deep impacts. I've mentored young men and women who live in unsustainable housing situations because of exorbitant rents, and there are few opportunities for reprieve. So I believe there are 3 things that we can do as a City Council to really take this challenge head on. As a City Planning Commissioner, I was a champion for affordable housing. I believe that we need to adopt development projects that surpass a compulsory apportionment of affordable housing units for any residential or mixed-use project that comes into our city. Second, renter protections. We need to absolutely be studying the impacts of the renter protection policies that we've put into place over the last 2 years and make sure that they are effective in the goals that they are trying to pursue. And last, we need to be looking at progressive land use policy, including liberalizing ADU development in a really full-throated way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Nancy?
Great, thank you, Stasha. So one of our wonderful tools that the city had was the redevelopment agency, and that was taken away from us by Governor Brown quite a while ago. And that was the one tool that the city actually had to create affordable housing. So now we really need to work with the developers and with our nonprofit groups that are partnering with each other. So we need to really make it easy for them to go forward and get a project through the system so that we get the houses built right away. And I would also like to see the time covenant extended. Right now there's usually a 50-year limit on an affordable housing unit, and it'd be nice if we could extend that to be longer. Code enforcement. Code enforcement is something that would be really easy for us to do for the existing units that are below standard. And that's something that code enforcement is actually a contracted out service right now with the city, but we could absolutely work on our code enforcement and making what is there habitable, and the residents feel secure that they don't risk being evicted from complaints. So it's really important to have that homing security.
Thank you, Nancy. Sorry, time. Sorry. Can you guys not see the timers? I'm sorry.
No.
If you have it in gallery view at the top, Laura's making her background change to give you a yellow for your 10-second warning.
And they could pin the video. Pin. Right click on my screen and pin.
Thanks, Laura. Sorry, some technical difficulties. Alicia?
You know, housing has to be the #1 issue for everybody on the Bay Area. It is such a travesty of how challenging it is for everyone. You know, I was a renter most of my life, and then I remember that I had to borrow money just to pay the rent when my kids were little and I was a single mom. It was just, it's like, where do you go? And it's such a challenge. And so I really feel what people are going through. There are many, and the question was asked, what are the policies that we can do? And there are many policies that we can begin to work with, but when we talk about housing, it's really beyond affordable housing. It's low income and very low income. We've been able to build housing in this community, but we need to look at that other aspect that's so important. And I know we have a lot of buildings coming up that will address that. But besides the building, you know, it's housing that people can afford. I was looking at some of the programs that East Palo Alto is doing for people to be able to purchase a house, because that would be so empowering. But it's also being able to do rental assistance, moratoriums on increases in rent, relocation assistance. You know, there's a variety, the safe parking. You know, homes are different. It's for renters, it's for people that are on the streets, people that are on RVs. You know, the ADUs, being able to build those in such a way, duplexes, fourplexes in areas that we don't think about right now. So being able to think out of the box, look at what some of the best practices are in this area. And I think I see red, so maybe that's the cue.
Thank you, Alicia. Carol is going to ask question number 2 now.
Yes, thank you. The second question is, we believe that all people have the right to a healthy environment. Recent fires have made the need for reversing climate change even more immediate. What policies or practices do you believe would be the most effective in addressing climate change?
Sorry, that's me. We'll start with Isabella.
So it always comes back to zoning. Automobiles are a fossil fuel product, and it's not just the fuel they use, it's the tires, it's the roads, it's the energy to produce them, and it's the rare earth metals. Rare earth metals aren't a fossil fuel, but they're highly problematic. And it's 60% of emissions. We already have climate refugees in California. So if we want to make room for more people, if we want to give them someplace safe to go, we have to address zoning and land use policy such that we can add housing in places that are safe from fire, like coastal California, like places like Redwood City. The second thing is we need to make it safe and pleasant to do something besides drive in a car. That means having dense walkable, mixed-use communities the way cities were built for thousands of years before we centered them on the car. It means allowing people to, density also makes transit economically viable. So I think in closing, the single most powerful thing we could do is change zoning to make it safe and pleasant to do something besides drive.
Thank you, Isabella. Next, Janet.
Sorry, it wasn't ready for me being next. So this is a subject that we've recently just talked about. We just passed our REACH codes, which I was a huge pushback on because of the equity piece of it. I want to make sure that the residents can all afford to eventually, as we all realize we have to get away from fossil fuels, that they will have the ability to transition into what an all-electric environment looks like. Also, I agree that automobiles are the #1 cause of our greenhouse gas emissions. However, my residents got to get to work and they need their cars to get there. And so therefore, we need to find a better transportation connectivity that really takes people where they need to go and affordable at the same time. So albeit I really want to get out of our automobiles and I really want to protect our residents from that, I want it to be something that they also can afford, and I want to help them do that. So that might mean I have to come up with policies that have an available funding mechanism attached to it where they can actually apply for and get help. Thank you. I saw red.
Thank you, Janet. Next, Jeff.
We'll talk fast. Thank you, Stasha and Carol. As Isabella shared, land use and zoning is key, and the downtown precise plan proved that we can get people out of cars, the #1 cause of greenhouse gas emissions. When you create density and a mix of uses together, we could create safe, walkable neighborhoods where people don't have to have a car. With the downtown precise plan, we assumed that about 23% of the residents and workers would not use a car. We were wrong. It's over 40% based on the city's transportation study and survey of people that work and live downtown. So we have to create more neighborhoods that are walkable, pleasant, and where people don't have to drive long distances. #2, we got to work hard to make electric vehicles and the total cost of electric and charging affordable for more people, because there are neighborhoods, as Janet said, well, that are not accessible to transit. 3rd, we have to make public transit equity-based, and I was a champion for equity-based fares on Caltrain, and as I served on the Samtrans board, we worked really hard to keep fares low because most of the passengers don't have access to cars that ride the bus. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lisette.
Hi, so for climate, I think we must preserve and restore our wetlands to prevent flooding, and parts of Redwood City are at risk of flooding. We should create living levees to protect against sea level rise, and we also shouldn't approve of development on our wetlands. Our planet is worth more than profit. We also need to invest and push for better public transportation, which would greatly decrease greenhouse gas emissions, as well as improve the well-being of many people who can't afford a car and make transportation accessible for all. So making streets much more walkable and making downtown much more dense and transit-oriented when it comes to housing. We need urban forestry, community gardens, and parks, including the preservation of the wetlands, to help with our combating of climate change. And I also believe that with the use of community land trusts, we can use this to supply or to create native, or to support native stewardship over the land, so there's native land return, and it could be a project or a place where programs that teach environmental practices that work with the community or with the environment.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mark.
The decisions our government leaders make now will largely determine if the world is able to veer from its current path toward obsolescence in the near future. If elected, this is a responsibility I will treat with the urgency and focus it demands. I will support sustainable development by preventing building on the salt ponds, by reusing materials through converting vacant office space into housing, and by closely monitoring water stores. I will support transportation projects that help lower GHGs, including those committed to enhancing bike lanes to promote trips with fewer emissions and increasing the presence of electric vehicle parking spots and charging stations. I also plan on achieving ways to help local businesses obtain more compost and recycling options, paper bags in lieu of plastic, and plant-based utensils for their patrons. Additionally, formulating a BCC for environmental sustainability is essential to ensuring that Redwood City is doing all that it can to meaningfully respond to the health of the climate and the planet. Ultimately, we have the collective power as the people to choose whom we entrust to lead, and these representatives will inform our direction forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. So I believe that this issue is preeminent among the issues that we're thinking about at the moment. If we, the wildfires that we're experiencing right now are a stark contrast, and it's affecting literally everyone in our city and in our region, and we must take action now. I believe that regional coordination is the first step. We really must be coordinating with cities across the peninsula and across the Bay Area region to get a coordinated response to climate action in our area. That means a number of things, including zoning, but that also means our addressing sea level rise. So as a planning commissioner, I know that sea level rise is not an element that is considered in the environmental impact report process. We need to codify that and include that in the EIR process. With that included, we have much more flexibility in determining what kind of projects are brought into the city that is appropriate to address climate change. And finally, reach codes. Of course, as Janet mentioned, it is something that I think that needs to be done in an evolved and an evaluative basis, but I do think that it is the basis of a moving forward process to eliminate GHGs from our ecosystem in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Nancy.
Thank you, Stasha. Public transportation, right now, it does not work well for the average person. And that's what we need, is we need public transportation that is reliable and goes in all directions. We have a north-south, basically, direction, and we don't have public transportation going east and west. So once we have a public transportation system that is reliable, dependable, comes on time, often, it can't be once an hour, once every half hour, then people will actually get out of their cars. And cars, as both Isabel and Jeff have already mentioned, really cost us a lot. They also cost us a lot in taking up land. That land is really valuable, whether it be a surface parking or undersurface parking. That land is really valuable and could be used for housing and not parking a car. So I think public transportation is a huge way to go about changing. Oh, there's red.
Thank you, Nancy. Alicia?
If we don't believe in climate change, just go outside. It's one of the worst airs that we felt. I mean, my throat is killing me. My students are telling me that a couple of them are gardeners, that it's been such a challenge for them to be out there and working this. So the question is, what can we do as far as policies for climate? It was mentioned breach codes, installing solar power in all of our municipal buildings, reduction in water consumption, more bike paths, that are connecting, the connection of the last mile between the transit area and to where you live, looking at the climate action plan and addressing the issues of today, looking at solid waste diversions, reducing our vehicle miles traveled, commuter programs, bike sharing programs. There's so many things that we need to continue to do as we look at our planet. I'm lucky that I live in California because I know it's such a big, important issue, and in many other places it's not. People don't believe in the science. And so we need to do everything we can from the coast to the Bay. We talk about sea level rise, and that's a really huge issue.
Thank you. Next, Chris.
Thank you. Climate change is one of the most urgent issues we face today, as everybody has said, including wildfires with PG&E blackouts and especially sea level rise. There are immediate threats to our community. We need a plan that contains specific actions and concrete steps to addressing these problems, especially with sea level rise. This is why I'm proposing the creation of a Citizens Commission on Conservation and Sustainability to ensure that we are working constantly and consistently on these issues with the attention, urgency, and the seriousness that it demands. My residents as well, we all need cars just to go downtown, let alone go to work. Alternate transportation is an absolute necessity for the Farm Hill and Canyon residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol will ask question number 3 now.
Isabella hasn't had a chance, I don't think. Did she? She's on, okay. Question
First.
Okay,
But I'm happy to castigate cars for another 60 seconds.
I'm sorry. The third question is, we believe no human being is illegal. Such dehumanizing language places the undocumented in harm's way and is used to discriminate against all immigrants. What policies or practices do you believe would be most effective in demonstrating respect and assuring the undocumented in our community of their safety?
We'll hear from Mark first.
I firmly believe that each person in this community is as important as anyone in the history of the world, and no one can pay more or do anything to be more important, because they are already as important as one can be, and that is true regardless of immigration status. Undocumented immigrants deserve the same dignity and respect as other residents. Referring to undocumented immigrants as illegal is derogatory and should not be accepted. Undocumented immigrants are an integral part of this community. We need to ensure that they are protected and feel safe executing the fundamental civil liberties that most citizens take for granted. Undocumented immigrants should feel comfortable when the police, when in need, be compensated fair work, and be able to work in appropriate, safe, and dignified conditions. They should have the security that they will not be stripped away from their families as they go about their daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, thank you. I believe that undocumented residents of Redwood City are critical elements of our community. And I believe that there are several ways that we can make them feel welcome and enable them to thrive in our community. First, I believe that our law enforcement agencies, including the Redwood City Police Department, our Sheriff's Department, should be working in concert with these communities so that they do not feel threatened by the presence of law enforcement and that they can rely on law enforcement to thrive in their communities. Second, I believe that services that are executed through the city should be accessible to undocumented residents of our community. This includes community health clinics. This includes access to job and training placement programs, and so on and so forth. I truly believe that. And finally, I believe that we should be trying to engage undocumented residents in the civic process. We should be encouraging them to come to city council Zoom meetings. We should be encouraging them to take part in their neighborhood associations so that their voices can be heard.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you, Stasha. Right, they are citizens and should have the same absolute rights as we do. I was talking to Terry Chin today, and so many of our state and federal programs need documentation, whereas she has been able to guide some of our undocumented citizens to programs that the city has done, especially through some of our nonprofits, like Park and Arts Foundation has given a lot to the Fair Oaks Community Center. So there's local avenues that we can help our our immigrants with. Also, I really feel that getting to know someone on a more personal basis takes away the scariness of someone being undocumented or different. So I really would like to bring the communities together. And I see red.
Yep, there it is. Alicia?
So as a daughter of immigrants, this is near and dear to my heart. I know that our members of our community that are undocumented, and I want to thank Mark for saying that we should never call them illegal. It's such a derogatory term, but so that they're within us and they're working in so many jobs. They're at our schools, they're parents in our community. They live in our community. They're doing the right thing by coming here and really trying to make something better for themselves, but most of all for their families. And so by becoming a welcoming city, I think it was a step forward, but there's a lot of other things that we need to continue to do. Again, I'm glad I'm in California where we actually had assistance for undocumented. We gave $1,000, not enough, to many of the families that are undocumented, and they were able to apply. But look at what's happening. They're not going for, they're not filling out the census because of the scare tactics that have come from the federal level. They're not, doing a lot of things and getting a lot of the services because there is that fear from police, fear from, other agencies that, have gone after them because of the way they look or other things. So we need to do a lot more for them. Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. As the community police officer for many years, I've worked tirelessly to connect with our immigrant community to gain their trust. I created the first Spanish language police department Facebook page in the state of California to ensure that Spanish-speaking community gets the information that they need to keep their families safe. I've also co-coordinated the first Spanish-speaking Citizens Police Academy. These programs help to build trust in our community, especially important for members of our undocumented community who are often fearful of reporting crimes due to their immigration status. I believe these programs really connect those bridges between the police and our community, specifically here in Redwood City. As a council member, I will continue to look for new innovative ways to engage with all the members of our community and to strengthen the relationships I've worked so hard to build over the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella?
Right, so obviously, no person is illegal. People are undocumented, and really that's managed at the national and state level. And we can first of all put pressure on the national and state level to change laws and to change policies to give people a better pathway forward to citizenship. But at the local level, I think there are two things we can do. We can protect people from harm, just as other individuals have said. That means reaching out, making sure that they feel safe and reporting things like crimes. It also means helping them to feel safe in accessing services, that we don't even require any kind of ID or documentation for things like food or housing assistance, etc. Just documentation of income to prove means testing, but beyond that, no requirement of citizenship. So I think, first of all, making services accessible, protecting them from harm, reassuring them that we're not going to be working with ICE or anything like that. And then the third thing is I think we can be really clever about helping people find pathways to citizenship where they exist and really offering incredible amounts of assistance in that so that those who are eligible can have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
Oh, you segued right into mine, Isabel. Thank you. So I look at it as a different way. These are my residents, my workers, my friends, my children's friends, and my neighbors. And I am working currently on a plan where when a child goes completely through school, an undocumented child goes through school, graduates, that they can be streamlined to citizenship. I think it's important that we count them, that they feel respected in the country they grew up in, and it's shame on us if we don't accept them as our citizens. They are hardworking, they serve our meals, they clean our houses, they do our gardening, and we treat them less than equal. It's about time we all turned around and took a good look in the mirror and said, our country was built on immigrant blood and tears, and we need to respect the fact that they are here for a better life, and we are going to deny them that? Wrong. We need to start working with our federal and state leaders to move this needle and quit just talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
As community leaders, all of us here on this call, we need to stand together with our undocumented community to help them be respected and be safe. There is a lot of stuff out there from different places that make them feel unsafe and unrespected, and we need to stand together, and I do stand with the community that is undocumented. As some of the speakers have said, there are some resources available, but we can do a better job of communicating with that part of our community. And it takes more than just social media. The county has offered an immigrant relief fund, but we have to get out of the technology divide that does exist and get out of our chairs and go to where people are, at festivals, at churches, pre-COVID when there were restaurants, and engage in one-to-one to talk about what's needed, what resources are available, and how to help these individuals get to these resources. I could go on, but I already have the yellow light. But we have to engage the community face-to-face, person-to-person, even at 6 feet apart, to make sure they know we are there for them.
Thank you. Lisette?
Hi, I agree wholeheartedly that no person is illegal. As a child of immigrants myself, I know my privilege as someone born in this country, what I can do and the ways I can navigate. And one thing I'd like to do is make Redwood City a sanctuary city. And beyond what the bill did in 2017 for the state, because right now the county and the city still works with ICE. And ICE today is the modern day Gestapo and must be abolished. There's no way that any relationship with police can occur that is healthy with our immigrant population. So we must descope how much police are involved, and we must cut all ties to ICE, even if the cases were violent. No one should have to be threatened with deportation because these orders are arbitrary and formed just to benefit landowners. So no person is illegal on stolen land. This is indigenous land, and for anyone to police someone for their documented status is atrocious.
Thank you. Carol will now ask question 4.
Yes, this is the last question that you have seen ahead of time. And it is, we believe all people have the right to live free from racial profiling and police brutality. What policies or practices do you believe would be the most effective in demonstrating our city's commitment to protecting all residents?
And we'll start with Jeff.
Great, thank you very much. I think one of the most important things we can do to demonstrate our commitment is to make sure that we continue to have diversity in our PD and our city workforce. It all starts with trust. And the more people that we have that look like who we are, that can speak our language, our native language, and understand our cultures, we will further that trust between law enforcement, fire, public works director, whoever it may be, so that we can then engage and earn that trust of our community. The second thing is that we need to have greater transparency in demographics in the people we hire, and who we appoint to the boards and commissions and council, because we do need to make sure that we see who's applying for our positions, who's hired, or who's being passed over, so that not only the best candidates are hired, but that there are no institutional barriers and systemic barriers to achievement and to engagement. And then if there are poor performers, they need to be dealt with quickly and expeditiously, because part of what the city does is just services, and they're people oriented, and we need to address bad behavior quickly.
Thank you. Lisette?
Oh, sorry, are we on to the next question?
The question was, what policies or practices do you believe would be most effective in demonstrating the city's commitment to protecting all residents against police brutality and racial profiling?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so first off, police do not prevent crime. They react to it. Crime is caused by poverty and instability. We must stop criminalizing poverty. There is no way that there is a healthy coexistence with community and police. Police reforms are not enough, and studies have shown us that reforms simply don't reduce police brutality or abuse. I aim to defund the $48.9 million in police budget and invest in initiatives and programs that have been proven to reduce crime, such as accessible mental health and homeless resources, housing assistance, free meal programs, and many more possibilities to meet the needs of the marginalized community. The police are an extension of slave patrols, and I am one of the few candidates that are willing to acknowledge that history. And if we are supposed to have any allegiance with our communities of color, our marginalized people, then we must acknowledge our history of racist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy that benefits from racializing people and oppressing them.
Thank you. Mark?
City departments and agencies should be diversely staffed, receptive, inclusive, accountable, and representative of the wide variety of perspectives and cultures that make up our community. At the grassroots level, I will actively engage with people from all backgrounds throughout different neighborhoods in the community about how to improve the city and the overall quality of life for its residents. At the official level, I will advocate for communication platforms to facilitate ongoing dialogue between the public, the government, and its agencies. To ensure more transparency and trust between the community and the police, I'm open to monthly police town halls, a citizens oversight committee, training revisions, prioritizing the hiring of officers obtaining a bachelor's degree or higher, and incentivizing officers to maintain adequate health and fitness standards in the interest of decreasing dependence on weapons. Equity and integrity need to inform policy first and foremost. It needs to be evident through council policy that this city welcomes and values all of its residents and is focused on resolving the often unaddressed or underaddressed issues facing marginalized groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Michael.
Thank you so much. This is an issue that is really near and dear to my heart. Upon the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there was a huge, massive rally at Courthouse Square here in Redwood City. I was one of the speakers there, and I supported the organizers of the Black Lives Matter rally. And subsequent to that, we created a memo that we sent to the city council and the city manager that outlined 4 comprehensive police reforms that we believe are our first critical step in addressing issues of brutality and profiling. The first includes creation of a community oversight commission that will help to guide policy decisions and possibly HR decisions for the city's policing agency. Increased transparency in data around complaint files, specifically around use of force and racialized complaint files that are sent into the city. An audit of the use of force policy that the city maintains to make sure that we are maintaining the most progressive use of force policy that we possibly can to avoid this. And finally, diverting funding away from the police to mental health and mediation services so that we can appropriately address issues that come before our city from our communities. Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you. So I believe that police officers go into that field because they really want to help people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be attracted to that field. But over the years, there has been a bit distrust that is built up. I think part of that distrust is because police officers have been separated from the public. I would really like to see officers, let's return the beat officer. Let's let them get to know the citizens in their beat and the citizens to know the officer. And it makes, it makes everyone have a lot more trust. I also believe that officers have been forced into situations that they're not trained for yet with the mentally unchallenged and domestic violence and drug abuse. So we need to look at partnering our police officers with professionals that are attuned to that area, not necessarily sending an officer in by himself. Maybe he needs to go in with a social worker. How do we partner better? And these agencies are a lot with the county, so there's a lot of partnering we're going to do.
Thank you. Alicia?
So this issue has been such an important issue for our city and for our residents. As mentioned by Michael Smith, we need to look at inclusive policies that really protect all people and all colors. We need to hold our police, fire, and all departments accountable. We need to have data of what that looks like. We need to have hiring practices that really reflect our community and really do outreach. And what does that look like? And that's inclusive. That includes our committees, our boards, commissions. We need to have continuous dialogue with our community that really brings out what we need to hear. I said earlier, I am so excited with what the opportunities that we've had with these terrible tragedies, both COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement, the fires, all of these things that we're facing, to say, what are we doing? And why haven't we done something better? Why are we not including more youth? Why are we not including more people that didn't have a voice? When we had the community dialogues, and I'm on the ad hoc committee to look at that, we brought in folks that we've never heard from. And so I'm so excited that they're now part of our city.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. The safety and well-being of our community is essential to me. After a 30-year career in law enforcement, make no mistake about it, I know that their police reforms need to be made. As a mental health commissioner for the county, I'm working with the county to address police response to mental health crisis situations. Having a police force that reflects the community they serve, is involved with the community, and lives in the community is essential. The police officers who live and are part of their communities serve much more and are more invested in their communities in which they serve. Our community is the police, and our police are our community. I support independent police oversight committees, and I support the creation of a Citizens Commission on Diversity and Equity to ensure more inclusive and transparent government that truly serves the needs of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella?
So I think we should take a public health approach to policing, and that's how do you prevent illness and disability, what's effective, and what's cost effective. And what that looks like in policing is a few different things. Number one, that means, similar to what Lisette has said, looking at what actually prevents people from turning to crime and diverting resources to prevention instead of, the cure. The second thing is bringing fairness research into our policing. There's an emerging field which really is able to look at a granular level at what's happening in policing and to identify whether or not people of color are being unfairly targeted, who's doing that, and what that really looks like so that we can directly address it. I think we need to implement policies such as those suggested by 8 Can't Wait. We need external review committees that are neither the council nor the police. There does seem to be a hesitance on the part of the council to directly challenge the police, so it needs to be an external review committee. And finally, we need to stop hiring fired officers, or we need to understand why they were fired. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
Thank you for this question. So let me go on record right now saying I do not support the phrase defund police, but I understand the sentiment behind the phrase. I do believe that it is time that we turn around and take a deep dive into what the services we are providing to our city and if they are the proper ones. When a uniform shows up to a mental health situation, it can only escalate the situation. So we need to look at how we address our mental health issues, and there are many of those now in our community because of our homeless population also. So I would like to see a regional approach to this where we actually bring in the county and other jurisdictions to help create some type of an entity that we can absolutely go to for our mental health cases. I do believe it's time for us to turn around and take a look at what we do with our police department. And to some degree, that may mean removing funds, that may mean adding funds. We don't know what it is yet, but it's time for us to have the conversation, and I will help move that needle forward.
Thank you. Attendees were invited to ask their own questions if time permitted, and it appears we do have time to ask a couple of those. So I'll have Carol read the first question from the audience, please.
The first question is, Redwood City has billions of dollars of real estate at risk for sea level rise brought on by climate change and our use of fossil fuels. What is your vision for east of Bayshore that will protect future Redwood City residents for decades to come?
We'll start with Lisette.
Hi, yeah, so I kind of answered this already with what I think we should do is restore and preserve the wetlands we have already. We shouldn't make it available like in what we see in the last few years with Cargill and the salt ponds. Like that should never happen again. And I know with Trump's administration, the EPA laws have changed a lot. So if this ever comes to threat again, we have to ensure that none of our land is served to further development. We need to make transit-oriented spaces in the land that we already have developed and try to make more green spaces. So that would also mean urban forestry. And, we can make these parks like also recreational. So there's more space to be in. And issues that are, also trying to make public transportation greener would help. And making it more accessible would also encourage people or incentivize people to take public transit, which I hope to make free as city council member. And yeah.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mark.
Yeah, so for east of 101, like Lisette said, restoring the wetlands would be critical to provide for a buffer zone to help prevent from rising sea levels to encroach upon development out there. But going forward, I think that it's like, given that we know the situation that we're in and the direction that we're currently headed, I don't think it's advisable to continue developing heavily east of 101. So I really want to see a limit on development near the Bay Area and near the Bay to prevent being at risk in the first place, while coupling that with the restoration of the wetlands. And then also just going full throttle as logically as we can on our environmental policy to help do our part in curbing this crisis. Obviously, it depends a lot on what other places in the world do, but we can kind of take the lead and set the precedent.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm proud to share that I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club, and I believe that this question is a question about systems, and that starts with referencing a comment that I made earlier about implementing sea level rise as a component of the environmental impact report. This is a systemic fix to this issue that you're asking about. If you do not have this as a component of the environmental impact review process, you do not have the flexibility to adequately create flexibility for City Council to approve or deny projects that are directly impacted by sea level rise. So that's the first thing. Second thing, we really need to double down on our focus on infill development. And so that means focusing on downtown development, focusing on El Camino Real, focusing on places that have been developed already, so that we can lower the transmission of GHG gases into the air, so that we can try to get ahead of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you, Sasha. So on the other side of 101 is so many opportunities. We're looking at doing a park linkage through the city, and I would love to see this park linkage end up with the property that the city already owns right on the water. And having a park right there is a real easy way to ease the sea level rise. As many speakers have mentioned, marshland is probably the most effective way for sea level rise to be mitigated. But we already have buildings out there. So we are going to have to take care of those buildings, probably raise the levees out there. We also have levees in Redwood Shores. Redwood Shores is dependent on our levee system. So we're going to have a combination of things. It's not a one size fits all for our sea level rise. And it's especially our levees, making sure that they're healthy.
Thank you. Alicia?
If any of you have ever seen a map of the 1970s when they started to infill all of our lands between Foster City, San Mateo, Redwood City, it is devastating to see, and it's across the bay as well, to see how much bay we had and how little we have left because of all the infill that we've done. So we really need to protect that. We need to protect our bay. We need to protect what's natural. We have a blessing and a curse by being on the water, right? We have either opportunities for making it accessible to our families, to our children, to be able to be on the waterlands, or to do something else that does not fit our community needs. As was mentioned, there's already a lot out there. How do we protect that? Levees are important. We are constantly putting a lot of money into Redwood Shores and into the other areas to make sure that we are protecting what's already there. But really have to look at what do we want it to look like? It's not going to go back to the 70s, but what do you want it to look out into the future? And that's really important about protecting.
Thank you. Chris?
Sorry, I'm muted. I've been out working in those communities when the floods come through, and totally people have to be evacuated from their houses. And I think this issue is way too important for me to give you my vision. I'm running to represent the needs of my community, and I think this needs to be fully vetted through our full community to see what they want to do in downtown or this area east of 101. And the climate action plan needs to address a lot more measured, concrete goals and plans to be able to shore up our sea rise level. So I think we need to ask the community what they want to do, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Isabella?
Great. So in California right now, and this has actually changed in the last 5 to 10 years, we have two sets of climate refugees. We have people who are have been exiled to the exurbs, fleeing fire, and we have people east of 101 who get flooded out about once a year. So there are two approaches. Number one, we have a plan now. Stanford donated intellectual capital to put together an awesome plan to deal with the flooding. We need to do that. We need to restore the Cargill salt ponds insofar as we can. That does not need to be developed. And we also need to really aggressively do infill development. We cannot keep zoning and the urban form of the 50s and accommodate two sets of climate refugees in our own state. We have to stop, obstructing housing. So I absolutely think we should deal with the flooding. There can't be development, on the salt flats, but we do have to give people somewhere to go. And that place is between 101 and primarily El Camino on the flats. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
For this question. So I definitely agree. We have a climate action plan that is before us, and it needs to have adaptation component to it. I do agree that sea level rise needs to be in the EIR. It is a tool that will be given to the policymakers that will help them better utilize and know what we're going to do with our east side in our marginal communities. Our mobile home parks need to be protected. I have been over there and helped people evacuate from their homes. They are the first ones to get flooded out. That is some of our last affordable housing right now. We need to protect that. Our levees currently are not up to FEMA standards. We need to bring them up to FEMA standards, or it's going to end up costing all of us. If you have look at any of your flood insurance right now, everybody's has tripled because the flood maps have changed. And so now when you weren't in a flood zone, you are now in a floodplain, especially in District 3. So we need to really look at where we are placing. If we're going to build so people can get around, let's build closer to transportation. Let's not build where people need to find transportation. Thank you. It's all right.
Jeff?
Thank you, Stasha. Two parts to that question, similar to Janet and Isabella. Number one, we need to take care of what we have there already. The mobile home communities that are east of 101, they should not have to live in fear every winter when there's a rainstorm and a high tide. They are flooded. It can predict when it's going to flood. They need to be taken care of. And when I joined the council first in 2009, when I went to the city manager, said, can I work on this? He said it was not a council priority. I then asked the mayor, I said, can I work on it? And said, absolutely. And here we are, nearly 11 years, and it's still not fixed. And I will still continue to push to make sure that those residents are taken care of because they are our residents. With regard to sea level rise, that is a regional conversation because the last time I checked, the sea levels didn't really care about city limits. We need to work across different cities with different landowners, with different agencies to come up with a regional solution to protect our communities and have a big conversation so we can start now and not wait 20 to 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol will now ask the second audience question.
Yes, and this question has been touched on before, but I think this is a little bit more specific. Low-income residents have been displaced from our community for the last 4 decades. What is your plan to keep low-income residents in Redwood City, remembering that low income includes teachers making $85,000 a year?
We'll start with Janet.
Yes, thank you. So I actually am promoting and working with organizations to bring affordable home ownership to our community, because I do believe that low-income affordable home ownership is a way to home security, housing security if you own it. So I really am in support of looking at how we provide that to our residents. And we also have plans before us right now that include teacher housing and worker housing, district workers housing. And I am 100% in support of that. I think our teachers are struggling. We are losing good teachers. We are losing good nurses. We are having hospitals that can't hire because they can't afford to deliver. So I am all about bringing on the affordable opportunity for a workforce. And number one and foremost has to be home ownership opportunities. And so I am working towards that, and I have been working on it for a few months now, at least, trying to bring that opportunity to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
I wish I had more than 1 minute, but we'll dive in as fast as I can. One of those projects I'm most proud of that I'm working on right now is an ownership project in South San Francisco. It's 100 units, of which 20% are going to be sold below market, built with mostly union labor and no public tax dollars. These are hard conversations to have, but they are important conversations to have with developers, builders, labor, and city agencies to make things like that happen. I'm working also on a workforce housing project of 200 units in San Francisco, located in the Tenderloin, 2 8-story buildings. Very tough place, but a very needed place. What this means is that we have hard work to do in front of us and to look together. When we talk about school districts, I was an advocate for school districts because they're one of the largest landowners in San Mateo County with 23 districts to maximize the use of their land for workforce housing. So we have to have conversations on innovation, collaboration, and partnerships to create affordable housing to keep our workers here in San Mateo County.
Thank you. Lisette?
Hi. So in order to protect folks from displacement, everyone on this candidacy race here can say that they're for affordable housing, but I'm for housing for all. There should be a guarantee to housing, and there should be options that aren't just on the market. So we must secure public housing, and we must also invest in a voucher program so we can just pay for everyone's rent. No one should be living on the streets or unhoused if they don't want to be, and if there's no need for it. So on top of that, I think we need to also implement vacancy taxes. So there's not a lot of buildings that are just left empty in order to sell at a better, higher price. Taxes on Airbnb rentals, and also such things as land uplift taxes, which would essentially tax the difference of whatever someone would make from selling a lot of land that they didn't improve on. So I think these kind of things, and also like requiring that people live here for 5 years without moving out is good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
So most of my housing platform is geared towards low-income residents, and that's very dear experience to me. Growing up in a low-income family, my dad's 70 years old, no foreseeable retirement, still works full-time, and I could go on. So my platform is that, I want to, like I said earlier, limit. So it's going through 2 different avenues, with the market rate rent and with the subsidized rent. For the affordable housing units, I want to decrease the moderate income allocation and increase the very low and the low income allocation percentages. For the market rate rent, I want to decrease demand, and the way that I want to do that is by limiting office space development and converting vacant office space in the future. By converting vacant office space in the future, now you're eliminating the threat of people moving here in the future, and therefore an increase in demand and an increase in the market rate rent. I also want to prioritize developers willing to build non-luxury units so that the rent is more naturally affordable, and preserving the naturally affordable units that we have currently.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. I have a number of possibilities that I think could really put a dent in this. So I think, of course, workforce housing, as several folks have already mentioned, Sequoia Union High School District is currently looking for projects at the moment, and they're looking to partner with our city agencies, including the City Hall, so that we can move forward with that. Of course, I already talked about ADUs. I believe that liberalization in terms of ADUs, specifically second-story ADUs, is appropriate, and I think that we can do it in an elegant way. It doesn't have to impact a specific neighborhood over the other. I think that we really need to be talking about disrupting the status quo in terms of zoning. Why is it that over 50% of our zoning in Redwood City is R1? If someone could answer that for me, I think I have an idea. It has something to do with race-based zoning policy, but we should kind of get with the times. I think there are some regional issues that I think that we can start to talk about. Can we implement a jobs, housing, and balance metric in our development processes, and also a regional homelessness strategy? I would also like to see a full-throated view of evictions data on an ongoing basis. We need to be seeing who's getting evicted, when, and how. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you, Stasha. So San Mateo College District has done a wonderful program, and I think that this is something that we could absolutely learn from. On all 3 campuses of the college, they have built housing for anyone who is employed by the district. And this housing is then rented at a lower rate so that they can save to purchase their own house. And they also have 5 years to live in this house. So this is a model example of what we can do going forward for workforce housing, especially as Michael commented on the school district. Our Sequoia Union High School district has a lot of land, as well as the grade schools. And we've just decreased the amount of schools that we have. We've got 3 school properties that are being looked at for alternative uses. So this is a great place, and we need to make it easy for these projects to come forward instead of taking years.
Thank you. Alicia?
A lot of what is said, I agree. We actually have 2 housing projects that are already done, and that's at the College of San Mateo Cañada. They're going to build the one at Skyline, and we're Redwood City's looking into workforce housing as well. Those things make a dent, but I go back to something else. It's which is a huge equity issue. It's called minimum wage. If we don't raise the minimum wage, and I've advocated a long time ago when everybody wanted to say 15, it's got to be at least 20. It's amazing that in this county, $80,000 is low income to be able to afford rent. So we have to do both. We can't just build housing that's low. We have to raise the minimum wage for folks. We have to work with our chambers, with our public, our private, all of the above to say, yes, they're doing work that other people don't want to do, but they're professionals in that area. We need to pay them. We want them there. We want to keep them in our city. So it's a balance of trying to build affordable housing or low income and very low, but raising the minimum wage.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. My wife and I were able to stay in this community because of a first-time home buyers program that we were able to take advantage of when we moved here. All great ideas. I think workforce housing for our essential workers and teachers is very important. I believe that increasing our wages so families can afford to live here and to stay here and not have to move out of the area. And I believe that preserving our current stock, encouraging developers to build affordable housing units and to create more below market rate housing is essential.
Thank you. Isabella?
So I keep wanting to go back to how did we get here? And an example, my neighborhood looks about like it did in 1950, and yet we've tripled in population. And so if you held the supply of food or clothing constant for 70 years while you tripled the population, you'd get bidding wars. And that's why we have crazy expensive housing. So the first thing we need to do is emulate programs like what they're doing in Vancouver, which increases the footprint and the density on residential lots. Their proposed approach will go from a 2% to a 50% ownership rate and hugely reduce the rents for those who continue to rent. So the first thing is to shift the curve so that housing becomes more affordable for everybody without actually lowering the value of single family homes if someone chooses not to develop their plot. The second thing we need to do is really support renters with rental assistance, things like universal basic income and a living wage. However, I keep going back, as long as there's scarcity and there's more people than there are places to live, you're always going to get a bidding war, and more money will help, but it doesn't solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for sharing your thoughts on these pressing issues. I'd like to invite each of you to share a brief 1-minute closing statement, and we'll start with Michael.
Thank you. I'm a Redwood City resident, a Palm Park neighborhood co-chair and planning commissioner, and I'm hoping to have the opportunity to represent District 4 in Redwood City. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to possibly represent the members of my district and represent issues that they care about. For as long as I can remember, I've been passionate about public service and community service, and I've tried to bring that value to Redwood City since the day I joined. I believe I will be an effective advocate for my district and Redwood City as a whole. I'm honored to have the opportunity to serve as Redwood City's 4th District City Councilman, and I'm thrilled to have each one of you on the journey with me. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but it is work in the service of enabling and bettering Redwood City for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you, Stasha. So I bring a lot of different perspectives to the potentially being on City Council with a number of you. I have a retail background, a renter's background, a property owner's background, 19 years on the Planning Commission. I'm very familiar with how to get developments through the pipeline and how City Hall works, all the way from the budget through all our different boards and commissions. And I embrace public outreach. I really think that going forward, we need to do a lot more of our public outreach. And I have an extensive background on nonprofits and how those are integrated into our city. And I am a consensus builder and a listener. So love to talk to anyone about any project that or issue that comes up with Redwood City. So thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you. Chris?
Sorry, my son's distracting me. Hold on a second. I've demonstrated my commitment to my community through my actions and my dedicated service over the last 30 years. I have got out there where the people are. My life's work has been on the ground, working with the people, often the most people in need, to make a difference in their lives and to improve the overall quality of life, health, and safety of every member of our community. It has been my honor and my privilege to serve our community, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to serve as a member of our City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella?
So I think everybody at this meeting agrees on what the challenges are: affordable housing and housing affordability, climate change, traffic, the quality of our schools, etc. But I think what I really bring to the table are two things. One is the ability and an understanding of evidence-based policy and access to really good information and ways of evaluating what we do. And the second thing, quite frankly, is a willing to disrupt the status quo. I think that we've tried to solve these intractable, difficult problems without disturbing anyone, without upsetting anyone, without disrupting anything. And the situation has become dire. We have to change the status quo. And that's something I'm willing to do. Personally, I've lived in Redwood City over 20 years. I've been a resident of the Acres for 7. My husband and I bought our first home here. I was 45. We had to save for 20 years in order to be able to afford a home. And because I rented for many, many, many years, I understand the plight of the low-income renter because I was one myself. Thank you.
You, Janet?
Thank you. I wasn't ready. Okay. So I have been representing my district since the day I moved in, which is 38 years ago. And I have continued to represent my district and the city of Redwood City as a Redwood City Council member. I bring all of my community dialogues to the table in my decisions. I am not swayed by any one particular group. I do my homework. I dive into the details, and I make my decisions based on what I think is best for the community at large. It isn't ever about me. It's not about my comfort zone. It's about what's best for this community. From the flooding on the east side, to fires on our side, to people struggling to find their stimulus check. Everything is connected to speeding down our streets, to taking out your garbage, to having garbage dumped all over your neighborhood. Those are the things that I have dove into. And even more, because I sit on regional boards and commissions. And I want to continue that fight for the residents. I want to be your voice, all of your voice, and I will carry your message. If you can't, I will. I have put my number up and my information on the chat. Please feel free to take them down and call me anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, first thing, Stasha, thank you and everybody for hosting us this evening. It's been a great conversation with a lot of different perspectives as some of the speakers have shared. The hard part is that we're still in the middle of a public health emergency, that I wish someone here or somewhere would tell us when it's all going to be over so we can get on with life. but I don't think any one of us has a crystal ball. There is going to be a lot of hard work ahead of us to take care of the decisions, the challenges, the issues that we have in front of us, and having the experience and having been there during the last recession to make those hard decisions. I've just decided to try to step in and rejoin the councils to move our community forward. And it's not just Redwood City. A lot of the conversation has been about working across the region, working together, working with other elected officials and working with other agencies to make sure Redwood City is taken care of, but also our larger community, which is the Bay Area and the region. Thank you for the time this evening. Thank you all for participating, and happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Have a great evening and be safe.
Thank you. Lisette?
Hi, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm someone who comes from a working class background. I come from an immigrant family, and I hope to amplify the voices of marginalized people, because no one needs to be a voice for marginalized people. We only need to help pass the mic over. And I'm someone who takes no special interests from or any money from super PACs or developers or police unions, corporate and lobbyist money. And I'm someone who wants to fight for workers and renters and marginalized people to have a place in this city and to remedy the impacts of gentrification and the negative effects capitalism has had on our communities and all residents overall. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you vote for a truly progressive candidate this election.
Thank you. Mark?
First, I want to say thank you for everybody that's watching and for everybody that contributed tonight. I thought the questions were really good. My top 3 priorities are equity, housing, and the environment. So they all kind of lean towards things that I'm really concerned about. So I appreciate everybody's contribution tonight. You know, I grew up in the Palm Park neighborhood, Redwood City. I'm deeply rooted in this community. I think I can really help this community and help serve this community. I'm honest and transparent. My campaign, I don't receive any contributions. It's self-funded. I have a $2,000 budget. So it's all very grassroots, and I work tirelessly to do it. I'll admit that there's going to be a learning curve, and I've already had to hit that learning curve, and I've learned a lot very quickly and abruptly, and I'm doing so every day. But I will work hard, extremely hard, to be able to serve your community, serve this community, and work for your needs. And you know, I've had an eclectic life experience, from running track with Usain Bolt to playing basketball in El Salvador, and I could relate to a lot of different types of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia?
I'm so excited to see how many people are really willing to serve. You know, I'm a public servant, both as a state employee at Kenyatta College and as a city council member for the city of Redwood City. And I am so lucky to have both jobs. When I'm teaching students on the Hill, I see their families afterwards in the city. And so I've been able to balance both of those because they're so important, and they actually meet and work with each other. You know, being the only Latina on the council, I think it's really important that we continue to represent our community and that we bring others forward. To me, that's really, really important. If we are at the table, we are responsible for bringing others forward that don't have that voice. So I'm excited to see that voice. I was excited to see it a couple weeks ago when we interviewed for our boards, committees, and commissions, and we had so many people come forward that we hadn't worked with before. So this is good for Redwood City. It's good to hear all these voices. And I'd really like to continue to serve for the city of Redwood City in general, and especially for District 7. Thank you.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce Katie Getz, pastor of Woodside Road United Methodist Church and a member of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, who will provide closing remarks.
Thank you, Stasha. At Woodside Road United Methodist Church, I've just finished preaching a sermon series about those signs that we see in so many front yards. They say, more or less, some of them are a little bit different. We believe Black Lives Matter, no human being is illegal, women's rights are human rights, love is love, science is real, water is life, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have to admit, over these last months, it's been really weird preaching sermons to a computer screen. But it's also the case that no matter how we communicate with our audience, those value statements aren't empty. I believe there are so many signs with those values proclaimed because they reflect the kind of community folks who call Redwood City home want it to be. Now, these signs aren't Redwood City specific. I'm pretty sure that our signs came from somewhere in Oregon. But if they were specific to Redwood City, they would probably add something along the lines of housing as a human right to reflect the challenge of affordable housing here in Redwood City. Tonight, we got to hear 9 candidates for City Council share how they would protect the most vulnerable among us and address pressing issues like climate change in order to live into Redwood City's commitment to being a welcoming city and to building great community together. Values upheld by Redwood City and proclaimed on our city website. As we consider how to best protect the most vulnerable among us, we are called to reflect on and question practices and policies around policing, the treatment of undocumented residents, and how we maintain low-income housing in Redwood City so that Redwood City is a place that people from all walks of life can call home. As we consider climate change and how to combat it, we recognize that Redwood City is part of a larger community, and decisions we make can help shape the actions of that larger community. It's a bit of a cliche to say that there is no easy answers. And certainly the minute-long answers we heard tonight are only a beginning. Thank you to everyone who worked hard to answer difficult questions in just a minute. But as we go forth tonight, we go forth knowing that in Redwood City, when it comes to housing, we value safety and affordability. We value protecting the undocumented, recognizing that these folks are valued and needed members of our community. We value police policies and practices that are anti-racist. We value taking leadership around climate change, both for our own well-being and that of future generations. As members of the Redwood City community, we look forward to working with a city council that shares these values. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Getz. Thank you, candidates, for sharing your perspective on these critical issues and your commitment to public service. And thank you, audience members, for joining us tonight. In closing this evening's events, I have 2 reminders. Be sure to register to vote and make sure everyone in your family eligible to vote also registers. Learn your options for how to vote. You can confirm whether you are registered to vote and track your ballot by going to www.smcacre.org. If you'd like to learn more about our organizations, check our websites and Facebook pages under One Redwood City, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City, and the People's Alliance of Redwood City. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.